Hi, this is Dr. Karen Becker, and Dr. Mercola recently interviewed Clint Ober and wrote an excellent article entitled "Electron Deficiency May Be an Underlying Factor in Most Chronic Disease," which prompted me to contact Clint about an interview for the Healthy Pet site. It was fascinating when I read the article. Our pet population is suffering from many of the same degenerative diseases as people, and although wild animals are naturally grounded, of course, animals that are stuck in our homes don't have the benefit of being able to regularly make direct contact with the earth. For those of you that have never heard of grounding, which is also called earthing, an abstract from the Journal of Environmental and Public Health provides a really nice, useful description. And this is what the abstract states. It says, research has revealed a surprisingly positive and overlooked environmental factor on health, which is direct physical contact with the vast supply of electrons on the surface of the earth. Modern lifestyle separates humans, and I will add in animals, from such contact. The research suggests that this disconnect may be a major contributor to physiologic dysfunction and unwellness. Reconnection with the Earth's electrons have been found to promote intriguing physiologic changes and subjective reports of well-being. Earthing, or grounding, refers to the discovery of benefits, including better sleep and reduced pain, from walking barefoot outside, or sitting, working, or sleeping indoors, connected to conductive systems that transfer the Earth's electrons from the ground into the body. The Earth is a natural antidote for electron deficiency and can provide animals with an infinite flow of electrons through grounding or making direct contact with the Earth. Here to discuss earthing, or this concept of grounding in animals, is my very special guest, Clint Ober. Clint has spent 3 decades working in the cable TV industry prior to changing course, and right now, for the last 15, I think, or more years, Clint has investigated how the Earth's electrical energy influences health. So thank you so much for joining me, Clint. I appreciate you being here.
Well, thanks for having me. That's great.
So back up and tell me, I know this was not your start, of course, in your professional walk. How did this evolve for you?
Well, one day I was sitting on a bench and I watched a bunch of tourists get off of a bus, and they were all wearing, the white tennis shoes that we all wear today, the athletic shoes. And for some reason, I just asked the question. I said, I wonder if loss of contact with the earth could possibly have any effect on physiology or on our bodies. And at the time, I didn't know. The reason I asked that question probably was because I had spent 30 years in the communications industry, and I had a working knowledge that everything, a working knowledge of ground, meaning that we had to ground everything to the earth in order to maintain electrical stability of the entire system. And so I knew that when we're grounded, that the body is conductive, and that when we put shoes on, we lose that conductivity. And that was the question. And I didn't really know. I had no idea. It was almost an intuitive type question. But that night I went home and I started playing with a voltmeter, and I realized that, wow, there really is a loss of balance between the earth and the body. And that night, in order to, try to understand what was going on, I ran a wire out the window of my bedroom, and 2 wires, in fact, one that I fed to a voltmeter and one I fed to a piece of metallized duct tape that I had laid across my bed, so I could lay on it or sit on it, touch it, and then have the voltmeter connected to the other one and validate that I was actually grounded. Well, that night when I was playing with it, trying to, just think things out a little bit, I actually fell asleep that night with the voltmeter kind of on my chest. In the morning, I woke up, the voltmeter was on my side, and I had hardly moved. So I said, wow, that's the first time I'd slept in a long time, because at the time I was 49. I'm a cowboy, really, and I spent, an avid skier, had all the pains and all the issues and back surgery. I've had every kind of pain issue you can imagine. But at that time, normally in order to go to sleep, I had to take pain pills. And in the morning, I usually had enough pain that I'd get up, I'd take an Advil and coffee or whatever to get going in the morning. And but anyhow, in a few days, I started demonstrating this to a couple of my friends, and one of them had severe arthritis, and after a day or so, he said, do you think this could possibly have any effect on arthritis? I said, no, I don't think so, but I knew that I was starting to sleep better, but then a few days later I realized that my chronic pain had begun to subside. And so that's where everything kind of started. And then I started to do a bunch of research, and I was in Arizona at the time. The internet was barely along enough at that time. This is back in 98, 99, that you couldn't go do research very easily. So I went down to University of Arizona and started asking questions and playing around in the library. But there was no information whatsoever about grounding the body or anything, nothing related to grounding, other than during surgery they have to ground the body to prevent static electricity, especially during heart surgery or whenever you open the skin. So anyhow, as time went on, I kind of, using my friends as guinea pigs, I realized that there was something real here. And so I couldn't find anything there. So I headed to California and started to ask questions. I went to visit with some people at UCLA first. And nobody really took an interest in it. Most people thought I was nuts. One person said, you expect me to believe that driving a nail in the ground, connecting a wire to it and connecting it to somebody's toe is going to make them sleep better? So it was more a comedy than anything.
Sure.
But it was fun. And but anyhow, after a period of time, I kind of gave up and I said, okay, well, I need more information. So I went and, with the help of a couple of students from UCLA, designed the first study. And it was more of an anecdotal study. And we took 60 people. And how I got these people is I was getting my hair cut one day, and I mean, you know, I'm telling stories here, so keep me on the track here. But anyhow, I was at a beauty salon. I heard a couple of ladies talking about pain and sleep, and so the light bulb went up, and I said, well, you know, I can just go around to the beauty salons and put a poster up and just solicit people to participate in the study. And we ended up with 60 subjects. And then we divided them into two groups, and then we took one group and we made these little pads, or what we call ground planes, for people to lay on during sleep, because that was the only time we could do a study, because everybody's moving during the day and there was no way to really get results. So anyhow, at the end of that study, we found that by and large people reported sleeping better, feeling better, having more energy, and just general improvements in health. And as a result of that study, then I was able to attract the attention of Dr. Maurice Galley, who was a retired anesthesiologist in San Diego. And he was curious, but he didn't really believe it. So anyhow, he said, well, let's design a study. And then what we did is we took a group of people and measured their cortisol, circadian cortisol, every 4 hours for 24 hours before grounding, then grounded them for 6 to 8 weeks, and then took the cortisol secretion profile every 4 hours for 24 hours at the end. And what we saw in the beginning is everybody's cortisol was kind of like spaghetti all over the place. But at the end of the study, all of the 24-hour circadian profiles all synchronized. And these were subjects that weren't living in the same area. They didn't know each other. So so that gave us a pretty good clue that, okay, well, we're affecting stress hormone cortisol.
Yep.
And so then that led to meeting Dr. Chevalier at the California Institute of Human Sciences. And he was an expert in electrophysiology and biofeedback. So the first thing we did there was, again, about 60 subjects. And we measured the normal biofeedback parameters. But the main thing that he determined at the end of the study was that as soon as you ground somebody, there's an automatic shift from a sympathetic state to a parasympathetic state. And so then we kept on going. Am I on track here? Just kind of
you're doing a good job. This is and actually this is great for our readers and listeners. People that have never heard of this will, exactly like you said initially, they would end up saying, "My gosh, you mean to tell me I'm supposed to, drive a nail and hook it to myself and ground myself out. But so this will help people understand that your initial idea or premise, how you validated it, which is excellent.
Right. Yeah. The idea was that I didn't know what it was or what to do, but
Sure.
I knew something was going on,
Right.
and I was just trying to quantify it.
You bet, you bet. And I don't think anyone, even the most basic of our listeners, brand new to our site, no one's going to argue that we're all electrical. Animals, you know, all of us are electrical beings. And so you just did further investigation than the average person.
Yeah. This is, body's electrical first, chemical second. Everything is electrical first.
And so in that next study, you were able to demonstrate that mammals, people, went from a sympathetic stress state to a parasympathetic calming state just by grounding themselves out.
Right. And when you're grounding, basically what you're doing is you're removing charge in the body.
Yes, and that's what I want to ask you about. So pertaining to pets and people too, but the reason that it's so interesting, especially for indoor house cats, most of us that have dogs, we let our dogs go outside, and most of us don't put boots on our dogs. I don't advocate, insulating our dogs with boots and fancy shoe wear. No. So dogs do have the occasional opportunity to ground themselves out. Cats, however, indoor house cats, help our listeners understand when we kind of sequester animals in our home above ground without a means of grounding out. Help us understand what happens to our bodies when we live above the surface of the earth.
Okay, well, first of all, you have to know that the Earth itself has a slight negative surface charge. And the word negative means it has an abundance of electrons that are able to move quickly and reduce charge. And that's why we ground everything to the Earth, in the electrical world. So as soon as you disconnect from the Earth, put shoes on, or you're in an environment where your body is being held above the Earth, then you lose this connection to the Earth, and then your body, as you breathe oxygen and as you do whatever, you deplete your body of electrons. The difference in potential changes significantly. And so I can go on to the studies here a little bit, and help bring some of this back.
Sure, they're really interesting studies,
to make sense of this. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, after I did that biofeedback study, and this will get to answering that question, we measured heart rate variability at the time, and we didn't really understand what it was or how it impacted. It was too early in the days when they were doing heart rate variability research. But anyhow, in asking some questions, we ended up meeting Dr. Sinatra, who's a cardiologist. And I was describing to him what was going on with pain reduction. And he says, Clint, you need to be looking at inflammation. Well, back in 2003, 2004, nobody was using the term inflammation in regards to health. And in my mind, it meant that you sprained an ankle and it was swelling or something. But anyhow, as I began to understand and doing some research and learned that when you have an injury or a damaged cell or the first immune response is a neutrophil going to the site of a pathogen or a damaged tissue, and what it does is it releases reactive oxygen species, which are, for short, free radicals. They're molecules with an electron imbalance. And what they do is primarily is they're kind of like they release kind of an acid and it destroys the pathogen. I'm using simple terms here, so you can correct any of this.
Nope, you're right on, and especially making it great for first-time Healthy Pets listeners that have no idea what grounding is. This is perfect.
Okay, so anyhow, what happens is if there is not enough redox potential or free electrons available to reduce the excess reactive oxygen species that are released, then they will attach to attack or steal an electron from a healthy tissue, and this sets up the oxidative process that we call inflammation. And so whenever a healthy tissue is damaged or cell, then the immune system sends more neutrophils, releases more reactive oxygen species, so it sets up a chain reaction. Yep. And so what I learned, once I understood the term reactive oxygen species, meaning that to me is an electrical term because it's meaning an electron imbalance. So by grounding the body in the early days, if I could ground the body in a reduced pain, and I knew that we had free electrons on the earth, so basically what we were doing is it's like pouring water on a fire. I mean, a fire is oxidation. And so when we connect the body to the earth and we get a reduction in pain, so we're pouring electrons, flooding the body with electrons, so now these free electrons can readily absorb and reduce these free radicals and prevent them from oxidizing healthy cells. So that's how we came around to that. And about that time, I think Dr. Ritger from Boston University, he came out with a big article on inflammation. I think it was in 2004 in Time magazine. There was a big article.
Right.
And he said, basically, you don't have all of these named diseases. What you have is you have chronic inflammation for an extended period, and it manifests differently in different people based on their genetics and their environment, their living and lifestyle. And so about that time, I said, well, you know, we've got something very significant here, because if that's the cause of, the underlying cause of a lot of these modern health disorders, then this is the cause of inflammation.
Right.
The fact that we're no longer naturally grounded. So that's how we got to there. And then we did a lot of research studies. But one of them was it's called delayed onset muscle soreness. This was because we had so many athletes. They were kind of gravitating to the grounding back then. And this was done by Dr. Brown at the University of Oregon. And what we did, or what he did, is he had a group of young athletes in perfect health do a bunch of exercises that burned the calves and created inflammation in the calves, like a normal workout. And what he did is he took an MRI every day for 4 days, and then he drew blood in the morning and afternoon every day. And then all of these subjects ate the same food, they were in the same environment, and but half of them were grounded, half of them weren't. And what we learned from that study is that inflammation does not manifest to the degree that it does. We still have the healing cascades, and a lot of the normal functions are going on, but we don't have that hot burning pain. The inflammatory response doesn't manifest in athletes who are grounded, and DOMS doesn't fully manifest. I mean, you still have a lot of the issues, but so anyhow, what we were looking for, in getting back to your question, I probably need to touch on one more study, but anyhow, what we were always in search of, okay, we're seeing these effects, we're hearing them, we're seeing them, and we're seeing dramatic changes in some of the biomarkers. But we're always looking for, what's the mechanism? Why, I mean, how does Earth actually do this? Earth ground. So anyhow, Dr. Sinatra called me up one day, and he had a group of about a dozen docs. They got together, and what they did, because what I told him, I said, every time we ground somebody, they turn pink, improve circulation. And so he said, well, come on back here. And what they did is they drew blood from everybody before grounding, and so you could see a lot of the rouleau formations and a lot of the issues going on with blood. And then we grounded everybody for 30 to 40 minutes, and then they drew blood again and looked at the blood. And before, almost everybody had some amount of rouleau formation. That's blood sticking together. He calls it sticky blood. And then afterwards, all of the blood cells separated and pushed each other apart. And so, okay, now we had something to work with, because we knew the blood was involved in all of this. So then, taking those results, we went back to California, and Dr. Chevalier, who is a physicist, and he's involved with the University of California, Irvine. And so what he did is he took and designed a study where we measured the zeta potential. That's the electrical surface charge on red blood cells. And what we found is, after grounding a person for about 2 hours, we had, like a 2.7 factor increase in the surface charge on the cells. So again, all the scientists had all their issues in question, but I just used cowboy logic. The Earth has a negative surface charge. When you put your feet on the Earth, your body equalizes with the Earth. The body becomes negative, becomes charged with free electron. And then now what we've confirmed with this study is that the red blood cells also equalize with the Earth. They take on a negative surface charge. And what this means is, like repels like. An example would be if you were to take little magnets and put the negative ends toward each other, they'll push each other apart, they'll repel each other. Or if one's, you go positive and negative, short of electron or whatever, then they snap together and stick together. So to me, when we're grounding the body, the most significant thing that we learned to date is that everything in the body becomes negative, and you can't have charge. You can't have, these are my words, and this needs to be further validated, but after 15 years and doing a dozen studies, which are all peer-reviewed and published now, and these are proof of concept studies. They weren't studies on diabetes. These were just, does earthing affect physiology? So what we learned is that when we disconnect from the Earth, our blood gets sticky, and it doesn't function properly. When our blood is thick or sticky, it can't get into the capillaries, can't well oxygenate the tissue. And I think that's one of the underlying causes of inflammation also.
You bet. So amazing studies, not only the reduction of cortisol, DHA, and other stress-related hormones, but certainly you emailed me a really neat study about, it was done on animals, double-blind, placebo-controlled, great study about alkaline phosphatase, triglycerides, and glucose that were also all lower in the grounded group. Lower levels were associated in humans with less risk of diseases associated with the metabolic syndromes such as hypertension, lipid problems, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. I was excited just because this helps people. Sometimes in human studies, they say, well, it was done in people. How do I know that that's beneficial to my pet? And so I do appreciate animal studies because it helps us correlate that all mammals' bodies, oftentimes physiologically, were very, very similar. And most certainly, these rats that you concluded this study with also had good physiologic metabolic changes associated with being grounded.
Yeah, and the thing that's most interesting about that study was these were, there's a group of 60 rats, 30 of them were put in grounded cages, 30 of them were in ungrounded cages. They had the same amount of water every day, same food, same environment. And these were retired breeder rats. I mean, these were, and the reason I picked them was because in all of my research, I found that most women in the ages, 35 to 55, were the ones who had the most or the highest levels of autoimmune.
Yep. And
because these were retired breeder rats, I thought that's a good corollary.
Sure.
But the thing that was interesting is there was no other factor other than just grounding the animals versus not grounding. There was no inflammation. They were healthy rats at the time.
Yep.
And so I just wanted to see the scientists, the researchers, everybody said I was nuts because their whole model was, what treatment do we, they induce an inflammation or they induce some kind of a problem, and then they try to
fix it,
experiment with different chemicals and so on. So anyhow, they were really not wanting to do this study.
They were probably confused, Clint. Very confused. Yes.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, and hardly anybody knows that the Earth has a negative surface charge, unless you're an electrical person like myself.
Yep.
And so anyhow, that study was really, that study was finished. It has to be written up yet, but I still have another small study that I want to do to help bring this home for pet owners but really people, because one thing I learned along the way is that many of, and you would know this more than anyone, I believe, if it's correct, is that many of the animals end up manifesting the same diseases as their owners.
Of course.
And so that says clearly this is environment.
Right, right. And animals are suffering not only from the same inflammatory-based degenerative diseases that we see in people, but there is a statistical relevance with owner-pet-related illnesses, of course.
Right. So that's what I want to really do a little more research on and be able to tie that into before publishing this study, because it's profound.
It is.
I mean,
it is.
Earthing is, on one hand, it's so simple, but yet it's nature. And I like to tell this story if I have time, and again, this is information that I read along the way in all of the research. I've been doing this for 15 years now. But in 1960, I recall that 90% of the visits plus to a general practitioner were for acute injury, infectious disease, and childbirth. And today, 95% of all visits to a practitioner are for a stress-related health disorder, or what they call stress-related health disorder, meaning that something is interfering with the body's ability to maintain normal
balance,
health.
Right? Balance.
Yeah. And so what happened? So to me, I go back to 1960. Prior to 1960, whether it's, autism, I don't know what the numbers were, but they were 1 in 100,000, or lupus was 1 in 100,000, diabetes, and all, they were high numbers. And today, we have, I don't know the numbers exactly, but we have this parabolic curve, the growth of these autoimmune health disorders. So, they seem to start in the late 50s and early 60s is when the curve really started. And so if you look back at what happened in 1960, the first thing we did, we invented plastics, 59, 60. First thing we did is put them on our shoes and carpeted our homes. At the same time, television was coming along. And when we were kids, I'm 69, so when we were kids, we were outdoors most of the time.
Right.
But as soon as television started coming along, then we started spending more time in the home. And back at that time, a lot of the women, if not the majority, I think, especially in the areas where I live, they all had gardens, and they always had their fingers in the dirt.
Touching the earth, right.
In the 1960s, they all were forced to go to work for corporate America in order to support our lifestyles. And so there was this big disconnect, and it happened innocently and slowly. But as time went on, today, in 1950, you couldn't get off the earth. You couldn't get ungrounded. We were barefoot or wore leather-soled shoes. Today, you can't get grounded without making a big effort.
Right. And that brings up a very valid point. It's difficult for people, especially if you're in a city, literally living one on top of another. It's difficult to find a park where you can take your shoes off and just reconnect with the earth. And most certainly, if you are a dog or cat living in a big city, I have a lot of small dogs, my downtown clients, those dogs are litter box trained. So they are not ever going, they're going maybe outside on a patio, but they are not physically touching the earth. So here's my question. Obviously, what would be best is to get outside with your pets, take your shoes off, leave shoes off your dogs, and touch the earth on a consistent basis to ground yourself out.
Right.
If that isn't available, Clint, if that isn't an option for dogs or cats or for people, talk to me about what would plan B be in these situations?
Well, first of all, I want to go back to your first statement. A lot of people say, well, I can't go for a walk or this or that, but you can find a spot somewhere where you can sit.
Yep. Yes.
Just
stand. Yeah.
The animal can sit and just stay touching the earth, for 30 minutes, an hour if you can. Because what I like to do, and keep me on track because I want to get back and answer that, is what I like to do often is when I get a chance, I like to demonstrate. If I'm giving a presentation, I like to ground everybody in the presentation if possible, so they can understand what I'm, experience what we're talking about. And the number one thing that happens with grounding, first of all, your blood is going to normalize, and then you see everybody's face turns pink. So I always tell them, look at each other before I ground them. And then I also tell them to take any pain in their body and scale it from 1 to 10. Nobody needs to know, just for them. And then what I notice is after about 30 minutes, their energy comes up, their smile comes up, their demeanor changes, they're happier, and their color comes way up. And then I, present it as a beauty product. But
which is, well, there are some of those superficial benefits, but for physiologic benefits for dogs and cats in a home, talk to me about what you've come up with to help out some of these people and pets.
We have a handful of products that we've developed, and I have to tell everybody, because a lot of people say, well, you're doing this to make money, whatever. I wish.
Right,
But anyhow, in order to do our studies, we had to create ground planes. And a ground plane is anything from a conductive rubber mat that's 10 inches by 20 inches, or to things that have silver in them, like bed pads and so on. But we had to design those products in order to do our studies.
Sure.
And we had to use electrode patches and put them on the feet, or, and connect them to the earth and so on. So we developed all of these. So all of these little products
they were necessary for you to complete your research.
Right.
Yes.
So as an end result, the researchers wanted them, the subjects wanted them, people who had relatives that were in the subject's relatives. And so this it was an accidental business.
Sure.
Because I was really interested, I was just curious about the
effects.
The effects. And so anyhow, what we found is, and I have a lot of background in the electrostatic discharge industry also. And these are products that they use bracelets that employees wear when they're handling chips and software to prevent static electricity from destroying the chips, or mats and so on. So I borrowed some of the technology from that industry, and then we made them available. They're just, the simplest of all is just a mat that's 10 by 27 inches, and it's conductive, meaning it has a lot of carbon in it. It has a snap on it. You connect it to the electrical ground, the earth ground of your electrical system. And if you don't have that, then you can use a ground rod. And so the concept there is when you connect something to the earth, it equalizes with the earth, whether it's a refrigerator, a computer, or a conductive mat. Mm-hmm. So when you go over and put your feet on it or your hands on it, then your body equalizes with the earth. So the products themselves really do nothing. They're really extension cords.
Right.
They just connect you to the earth, like plugging a lamp into the electrical.
Right.
And it allows you to be grounded while you're indoors. Mm-hmm. And for many people, this is essential.
Yes.
That want to be grounded. And what I encourage everybody to do, to really get their mind around this, is to go outdoors, find a spot, get grounded for 30 minutes or more. And again, just sit there if you have to, and just notice the changes in your body. Mm-hmm. And if you feel better, then continue to do more. It's not practical for most people. Our life today is a double-edged sword. We get all these creature comforts, but we lose some of the.
Right.
We're in a nature deficit situation. So, but anyhow, I don't push product. I mean, what I push is the science and the education. But to me, really, earthing is a statement. It's not about products. It's about if contact with the earth can have this effect on your being, your health, and your physiology, then you really have to back up. Everybody has to back up and say, what have we done to ourselves?
Right.
And how are we going to fix it?
How are we going to fix it? I mean, it does seem just intuitively natural to assume that we are all connected. We're connected to the earth. And when we lose our connectivity to the earth, a part of us starts to develop stress, emotional stress, physiologic stress, I think spiritual stress. I think that we're meant to be connected to the earth. And by doing so, literally grounding ourselves out, but also connecting all of us together. When that can't happen, I was one of those people that you just mentioned, that family, friends, when Dr. Mercola several years ago started to ground himself out, I said, well, Dr. Mercola, you have to get me a pad. So I sleep on a pad, and I also have a pad on my chair every night when I write from my laptop. I sit on a pad. So here's my question for you. The only two, my kitties are indoor kitties. They do go out on the patio, but they are not by any means outdoor cats. My dogs have the luxury of being able to spend many hours a day outside. So they are naturally being able to experience earthing the way nature intended. When a storm comes about, and this spring is a great example, in the Midwest we've just had torrential downpours.
Right.
My grounding pads are a hot ticket item in my home. So the minute that, I don't know, pets can animals can feel barometric pressure change. Some people can, I can't. My animals know when electrical storms are coming, and they start kind of vying and taking dibs on who gets the pad on the chair. And by default, if they don't get the chair pad, they all end up on my bed, because that's where my grounding pad is. On my half of the bed is where my pad is. My husband doesn't have a pad, so all of the creatures then are on my half of the bed. Why is this? Help me understand what's happening there.
Well, I'll give you a theory, and the reason I know of this is because in the communication industry, we work with towers, and sometimes people will be on towers. Towers get hit by lightning. But anyhow, and then also there's lots of accidents in the electrical industry, and we've learned certain things. But anyhow, I believe that why pets like to be grounded when there's storms around is because, first of all, there's a welling up of negative charge equal to the amount of positive charge in the clouds. And what happens, though, if you are well grounded during a lightning strike, there's a phenomenon called flashover, meaning that the lightning takes the path of least resistance to ground. And it's going through your body has a lot of resistance. But if you are an antenna and grounded, then what happens, I believe, is the lightning may hit you, but it will flash over. Mm-hmm. I think animals maybe know this.
Sure.
And to validate this a little bit is a lot of the people who actually die from lightning, and there'll be a lot of issues different than this, but if you look at their situation, normally you'll see holes in the shoes. Mm-hmm. So people who are wearing shoes, if the lightning hits them, then in order to complete the path, it has to burn a hole through the rubber. Mm-hmm. And so you don't want to be wearing shoes if you are going to be hit by lightning. Right. You want to be grounded. Yes. and hope for the flashover effect. So I think animals know this. Animals know things that we don't.
Yes, they do, and
they're aware of things.
Yes, the common sense is, of course, much to be desired. They also don't have to have double-blind, placebo-controlled studies, Clint, to prove that this is a valid modality. They'll just you put a pad down and they just go lay on it. Yes. And certainly, all animals, instinctually, intuitively, even when you watch cows in a field or wild animals, you'll see them align themselves correctly to the Earth's magnetic fields, as well as ground themselves out when needed. Certain parts of their bodies even, they'll touch to the Earth for certain physiologic benefits. And that's natural, and we don't question that. It's only humans that end up wanting to justify some of these common sense principles. I'm so thankful that you were inquisitive enough in this last 20 years to push for more science and more, really, you had questions that you couldn't get answered, so you've just continued to ask them, and you've had really neat answers, and I appreciate you sharing some of the research that you've done today with me. I also appreciate your kind of desire to continue down this path of learning more about this common sense and intuitive technique of grounding ourselves out. I'm excited because I believe that this could not only help the animal kingdom in terms of managing chronic disease and inflammation, but in terms of managing stress. Animals, dogs and cats particularly, have a tremendous amount of physiologic stress, emotional stress, because they're not exercised, they're not providing appropriate diets. Owners are doing a great job, the best they can, but it really pales in comparison to what they would be eating in the wild, as well as existing in the wild, including being able to touch the earth. So I appreciate you taking this time to discuss the concept of grounding or earthing with us. I know all of our readers will be intrigued by listening to this, and hopefully you've spurred people on enough to do their own research so they can feel comfortable providing a means of grounding out for their dogs and cats in their homes. Thanks, Clint.
Thank you. It was fun. I enjoyed it.